Oh, yeah, I know.
Okay, hello everyone, and welcome to the final day of JU. Okay, today I will be presenting a piece that I adapted from Charlotte Perkins Gilman's short story, The Yellow Wallpaper. I'm sure we all read it in AP Lit. At the time that the story was written, a new medical treatment was becoming increasingly popular. It was called the rest cure, and it was particularly used on women experiencing postpartum depression, or a sadness that overtakes some women during or after delivering a child. The treatment included locking the women in a room until their hysteria passed. Great idea. During this time, the women weren't allowed to work, write, or do anything. A lot of the women were driven to madness and even some to commit suicide. Charlotte Perkins Gilman experienced this treatment herself at the hands of her husband, who was a physician. She wrote this story about her experiences, and I'm going to be showing it to you today. Warning, there are depictions of depression and suicide in this piece, and if that is something that you feel that you cannot handle, make your way on out. It's okay. But on that note, I would just like to thank my actors, Nicole, Gaby, Alicia, Abby, and Joe. I really couldn't do it without them. They had a lot of patience with me in this project, and I admire their gusto. Also, I would like to thank Johnny for helping me with my tech, and I would like to thank God because we finally did it. So. Here is the Yellow Wallpaper.
It is very seldom that mere ordinary people like John and myself secure ancestral halls for the summer. A colonial mansion, a hereditary estate. I would say a haunted house, and reach the height of romantic felicity. But that would be asking too much of fate. Still, I will proudly declare there is something queer about it, else why should it be so cheap, and why have stood so long untenanted? John laughs at me, of course, but one expects that in marriage. John is practical in the extreme. He has no patience with faith, an intense horror of superstition, and scoffs openly at any talks of things not to be felt and seen and put down into figures. John is a physician, and perhaps, I would not say it to a living soul, of course, perhaps that is one reason I do not get well faster. You see, John does not believe I am sick, and what is one to do? If a physician of high standing and one's own husband assures friends and relatives there's nothing the matter with one but temporary nervous depression, a slight hysterical tendency, what is one to do? My brother is also a physician, also of high standing, and he says the same things. So I take the phosphates, or phosphites, whichever it is, and tonics and journeys in air, and I'm absolutely forbidden to do work until I'm well again. Personally, I disagree with their ideas. Personally, I believe that congenial work with excitement and change would do me good. But what is one to do? I sometimes fancy in my condition if I had less opposition and more society and stimulus. John says the worst thing I can do in my condition is to think about it. And I do confess it makes me feel bad. So I will leave it alone and talk about the house. The most beautiful place. It is quite alone, standing well back from the road, 3 miles from the village. There is a delicious garden. I have never seen such a garden large and shady, filled with buck-sported paths and lined with grape-covered arbors with seats under them. There were greenhouses too, but they're all broken now. It has been empty for years. That smells my ghostliness, of course, but I don't care. There is something strange about this house. I can feel it. I even said to John one moonlit evening, but he said what I felt was a draft and shut the window. I get unreasonably angry with John sometimes. I'm sure I never used to be so sensitive. I think it is due to this nervous condition. But John says, if I feel so, I shall neglect proper self-control. So I take pains to control myself, in front of him, at least. And that makes me tired. John is very careful and loving and hardly lets me stir without special direction. I have a scheduled prescription for each hour in the day. He takes all care for me. So I feel ungrateful not to value it more. He said we came here solely on my account, that I was to have perfect rest in all the air I could get. So we took the nursery at the top of the house. The room is big and airy. The windows are barred for little children, and there are rings and things in the walls. I have never seen a worse paper in my life. One of those sprawling, flamboyant patterns committing every artistic sin. It is dull enough to confuse the eye in following, pronounced enough to constantly irritate and provoke study, and the one follows lame, uncertain curves for a short distance. They commit suicide, plunge off at outrageous angles, destroy themselves in unheard of contradictions. The color is repellent, almost revolution. I never saw a worse color in my life. A smoldering, unclean yellow, strangely faded by the slow turning sun. It is a dull yet lurid orange in some places, a sickly sulphur tint in others. No wonder the children hated it. I should hate it myself if I had to live in this room long. Oh, there comes John. I must put this away. He hates to have me write a word. John laughs at me so about this wallpaper. At first he meant to repaper it, but afterwards he said I was letting it get the better of me, and that the worst thing for a nervous patient was to give way to such fantasies. He said that after the paper, it would be the heavy bedstead, and then the gate at the top of the stairs, and so on. I'm really getting quite fond of the room. Oh, but that horrid wallpaper. Out of one window, I can see the garden, the mysterious deep-shaded arbors, the riotous old-fashioned flowers and bushes and gnarly trees, and out of another, I get a lovely view of the bay and the private little wharf belonging some pattern in a different shade, a particularly irritating one. For you can only see it in certain lights and not clearly then. Oh, there comes John's sister, such a dear girl and so careful of me. I must not let it find me writing. I'm getting dreadfully fretful and querulous. I cry at nothing and cry most of the time. Of course, I don't when John is here or anybody else, but when I'm alone, and I'm alone a good deal just now. I'm really getting quite fond of the room, in spite of the wallpaper, perhaps because of the wallpaper. It dwells on my mind, so I lie here and follow the pattern about by the hour. It makes me tired to do so. John says I mustn't lose my strength and has me take lots of cod liver oils and tonics. Dear John, he loves me so and he needs to have me sick. I tried to have a real, honest, reasonable talk with him the other day and tell him how I wish he would let me go and make a visit to Cousin Henry and Julia. He said I wasn't able to go. I didn't make a very good case for myself, for I was crying before I had finished. These nervous troubles are getting dreadfully depressing. But I must not think of that. And dear John, he just gathered me up in his arms and carried me upstairs and sat by me and read to me till it tired my head. He said I was his darling and his comfort and all he had, and that I must keep well for his sake. There's one comfort. The baby is well and happy. Does not have to occupy this room with the horrid wallpaper. If we had not used it, that blessed child would have. What a fortunate escape. I hadn't thought of it before, but it's lucky John kept me here after all. I can stand it so much easier than a baby, you see. There are things in that paper that nobody knows but me or ever will. Behind that outside pattern, the dim shapes get clearer every day. It is always the same shape, only very numerous. It is like a woman stooping down and creeping about. I don't like it a bit. I wonder. I begin to think. I wish John would take me away from here. It is so hard to talk with John about my case because he's so wise and because he loves me so. But I tried it the other day. It was moonlight. The moon shines in all around, just as the sun does. I hate to see it sometimes. It creeps all around and always comes in by one window or another. John was asleep. I hated to wake him, so I kept still and watched the moonlight on that undulating wallpaper till I felt creepy. And the woman behind seemed to shake the pattern, just as if she was trying to get out. I got up softly and went to feel and see if the paper did move. And when I came back, John was awake. On a pattern like this by daylight, there is a lack of sequence, a defiance of law that is a constant irritant to a normal mind. The color is repellent enough and unreliable enough and infuriating enough, but the pattern is torturing. You think you've mastered it, but just as you get well underway and following, you turn the back somersault, and there you are, and slaps you in the face, knocks you down, and throws upon you. It is like a bad dream. I thought of something like it. That is sometimes. There's one marked peculiarity, a thing nobody seems to notice but myself, and that is that it changes. changes as the light changes. I always look for that first long, straight ray of sun. It changes so quickly, I can never quite believe it myself. By moonlight, you would know it's the same paper. At night, in any kind of light, in lamplight, twilight, candlelight, and worst of all, by moonlight, it becomes bars. And the woman behind is as plain as can be. I didn't realize for a long time what the thing was that shone behind that dim self-pattern. But now, I am sure it is a woman. By daylight, she is quiet, subdued. I can't see it's the pattern that keeps her so still. It is so puzzling. It keeps me quiet by the hour. The fact is, I'm getting a little afraid of John. He seems very strange sometimes. It strikes me that perhaps it is the paper. I've watched John, but he didn't know I was looking, and I caught him several times looking at the paper. And what did he do? I caught her with her hand on it once. She said that the paper stained everything it touched, and that she wished we would be more careful. I am determined to find it out myself. Life is very much more exciting now than it used to be. John is so pleased to see me improve. He even laughed a little and said the other day that I seemed to be flourishing in spite of my wallpaper. I had no intention of telling him it was because of the wallpaper. He might make fun of me. He might even try and take me away, and I don't want to leave now, not till I have found it out. This is strange as yellow, this wallpaper. It makes me think of all the yellow things I ever saw. Not beautiful yellow things like buttercups, but foul, old, ugly yellow things. But there's something else about this wallpaper. The smell. It gets into my hair. It's such a peculiar odor, too. I lie about by the hour trying to analyze it and figure out what it smelled like. It is awful in this damn weather. I wake up and find it hanging over me. It used to disturb me at first. I thought seriously of burning the house to reach the smell. But now I'm quite used to it. There's a very funny mark in this room, low down near the mopboard. It's a long, straight streak that runs around the room. It goes behind all the furniture except the bed. It is a long, straight, even smudge, as if someone had been rubbed up against it over and over and over, round and 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 round. It makes me dizzy. I really have discovered something at last. At night, when I watch, when it changes, I have finally found it out. The front pattern does move. The woman behind shakes it. Sometimes I think there are a great many women, and sometimes only one. And she shakes the pattern, and it is her crawling that shakes it around so. And all the time she is trying to climb through, but nobody can climb through that paper. It strangles so. John tried to sleep with me, the slide thing, but I told him I should undoubtedly rest better for a night all alone. That was clever, for really, I wasn't alone a bit. As soon as it was moonlight, and that poor thing began to crawl around and shake the pattern, I got up and went to help her. I pulled, and she shook, and I pulled, and before morning, we had peeled woman tries to run away, I'll tie her up. I forgot. Oh, I can't reach far with anything to stand on. Oh, the bed will not move. I'm getting angry enough to try something desperate. To jump out the window would be an admirable exercise, but the bars are too strong to even try it. I don't even like to look out the window. There are so many of those creeping women, and I wonder if they all came out of the wallpaper as I did. But now, I am securely